Hello, my name is Dr. Adam Estes from the University of Mississippi. I'm the professor of saxophone and bassoon here. I've created this video to help young musicians prepare their scales and their etudes for Year B for their middle school all-state preparations. This video is broken down into 3 parts. The first part deals with the scales, and then the next 2 parts deal with the excerpts that are asked of you from the Rubank Advanced Method, Volume 1, compiled by Jaime Waxman. For your scales, I recommend playing them with consistent tempo and to practice those with the metronome. In the scales video that you're about to watch, you'll notice that I have a very consistent tempo throughout the whole thing. I tongue up and I slur down. I like to recommend that students focus on the 4 T's when preparing their scales. That is tone, tempo, technique, and tonguing. If you have consistent tone, consistent technique, consistent tonguing, and really good tempo, you're going to do very well on your scales. You'll notice that I play at the same tempo, up and down. I take a breath and then proceed to the next scale in the same fashion. The order in which you play your major scales is entirely up to you. I recommend following some sort of order that makes sense. In the video, you'll notice I start with concert C and then go to concert F, concert B flat, concert E flat, A flat, and then D flat. And at the conclusion of my major scales, I take a breath, reset, and then I play my chromatic scale from my low B flat all the way up to the high F sharp and then back down. The second part of this video deals with the first excerpt, and this is from number 9 in the Waxman book. To help you understand this etude and help you organize it better, I think you should look for phrases. How long is each phrase? The first one is very clearly 4 measures at forte volume. You see the pickup note, we have 1 flat in the key signature. It's pretty clearly F major for us at the very beginning, which is concert A flat, and so that can help you understand that. Make sure you're considering which B flat fingerings you're going to use. There are 2 B flat fingerings that I encourage you to think about for this etude number 9. One is what we call P, and the other is called TA, and I'm going to share those on the screen with you now. In general, at the first part of this etude at number 9, I like to use the P fingering there, because 1 finger in 1 hand with your index finger is a lot easier than 3 fingers over the course of 2 hands. So enjoy using that fingering for the first line of this piece. I think once you get to the middle of the second line where it has F, A, B flat to the high C, you can use the TA fingering, which is your side B flat fingering. My final suggestion on etude number 9 is about articulation. There are many examples of staccato. Please remember that staccato only means separated. It doesn't mean short as humanly possible. You can still detach a note from the next one or the one that precedes it by just putting a little space. It doesn't have to be a ton of space. It doesn't have to be super short, but the idea is that there's some separation. So make sure you distinguish between staccato and then the slurs as well. Make sure you're tonguing the first note of a slur and then not tonguing under the slur. In with your air in a very natural way, and it'll sound great. Please enjoy this performance of etude number 9. For A221, the lyrical one that is called Andante, look at the tempo. It says eighth note equals 152. If I put a metronome on for you at that tempo, this is what it would sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In your practice of A221, I think it's important to feel it with the eighth note pulse as indicated. The performance tempo says eighth note at 152 beats per minute. That's pretty fast. So I think initially I would slow it down to something like here, which is like 116. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. If you practice that slowly and get a real good sense of the eighth note pulse, that's going to serve you well. As you speed it up closer to the performance tempo of 152, you'll notice that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's really kind of frantic at that tempo. But what I encourage you to do is when you get close to performance tempo, I would like you to transition to feeling this in 3 beats per the measure as opposed to 9. This means that we're going to feel it in compound time, where you're going to be pulsing the dotted quarter note value. What does that mean? Well, if I put the quarter note here at 51 beats per minute, say, and put the subdivision on there, you're going to really hear this emphasis on 1, 4, and then 7. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In my performance of this in this next part of the video, I think you'll hear that I'm feeling it in 3 big beats per measure as opposed to 9 smaller eighth note beats per measure. So my advice to you is to learn it slowly with the eighth note pulse at maybe 100 beats per minute, gradually bump it up with your metronome. Once you get closer to your performance tempo, start to shift it to a compound beat where you're feeling the dotted quarter note pulse. And then you can put the subdivision on that, but the dotted quarter pulse will help you feel this in longer lines, and it's not going to be so note to note driven. Another important consideration for A221 is that you should play as lyrically and as sensibly as you can with your tone, and that you should think about using vibrato. Vibrato is an external ornament on the saxophone. We control it externally with our jaw. If you were to say va, 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 which is the syllable va, 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 you'll notice that the jaw hinge controls that. If you have a good sound and then you add vibrato by saying va, 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 it's actually going to vibrate the sound externally. And if you gain facility with that, it actually adds to the tone in a really pleasing and expressive way. When you're playing solos like this or playing a solo in your band, I recommend considering to use vibrato to enhance the tone. Phrasing in A221 is important to consider when performing. There's a lot of information provided by the composer here. The first measure crescendos nicely into the second measure, it comes back down, and then there's a breath. When you go to the third measure into the fourth measure, it's really important that you crescendo all the way into the G on the downbeat of measure 4, and then relax into the F sharp that follows. When you look at the second line of this etude, there's some interesting articulation markings here. The second line, second measure, you have a D octave jump that's under a slur, but then when you come down C, B flat, etc., those are under a slur, but they have staccato markings. This is an interesting articulation marking. What you need to do here is to tongue those notes, but lightly. And this is actually an articulation that string instruments find a lot. And they're very adept at playing those, but I think as wind players, we don't see them as often. And we kind of wig out, should it be slurred, should it be tongued, etc. So it's kind of somewhere in between. Make sure you articulate it, but connect it in an elegant way as you come down with that decrescendo. When you get to the second line, third measure, you'll see that the rhythmic notation gets a little bit more interesting. You have eighth note, you have 4/16, you have a quarter note, and then 4 32nd notes. Remember that 4 32nd notes equals 1 eighth note. Okay, so it's important to place that in the right spot and to remember that there are 4 32nd notes in an eighth note beat there. So those are going to go by pretty quick when you get to the performance tempo. The fingering I would suggest playing there with the 30-second notes is to use your P, B flat fingering, and then when you go up to the C, you finger P, and then with your middle right side key, lean on your TC key. So that's the middle right side key on the saxophone. I think if you add that to your P fingering, it'll give you C, then you take it off B flat down to A and then back to B flat. It'll help you navigate that pretty easily, and you'll notice that I do that in that video. Consider these things when you're studying and practicing number 21. I think it will help you think about using vibrato, think about feeling it in the compound beat, and enjoy the P fingering with the TC to help navigate the 30-second notes. Make sure you're paying attention to the articulations in the second measure of the second line. What does it sound like to tongue those notes under a slur in a really elegant way? Consider those, and I think you will enjoy studying and performing this. And I hope now that you enjoy my performance video of this.